On the Rec Yard, Women's Prison Podcast, where we are live on the Rec Yard every Wednesday night. Hey, everybody. Marci Marie here.
I'm Toonchi.
We are on the Rec Yard, Women's Prison Podcast. We're together tonight in the same room.
Here we are.
Little different style. I have driven south to Austin because we have been in federal court all day.
Yeah, and we weren't in handcuffs.
We were not in handcuffs. And what a great feeling that was to go into the courthouse, to come and go as we please and not be in handcuffs.
Right, and to be treated with decency and respect by the security. And very different. Golly, I don't think I have been back in a courtroom since I was convicted. I think that was my first time back in a courtroom.
And how were your nerves?
Oh, Marci, you already know my nerves were so bad. I feel like my nerves were a little bit about that, but mainly for you. And I was just so nervous for you. And it was because I didn't know how I was going to feel or react if they tore into your character, which is often, what they do.
And we thought that they might. So what we're talking about tonight on tonight's episode of On the Rec Yard, it is a special episode. They called Rec a little bit late. We're normally here at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. We were still at the courthouse at 6:30. And so we knew that was not a possibility. So we're a little bit late. Thank y'all for joining us anyway. Thank you for hanging in there. What we want to do is give you an update regarding the lawsuit against the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, specifically their executive director in his capacity in that role. And it is the lawsuit is around bringing safe temperatures into Texas prisons, because what we know from our lived experience is people are getting sick and even dying being housed in the astonishing temperatures, the very high temperatures in Texas prisons, and we're suing them.
Yeah. I think we should just get right into it. I feel like this is the biggest update over the past week anyway. So if you just want us to dive right into it.
Yeah, I think that we should just dive right into it, actually. So I drove down because yesterday morning, basically for 2 days, we get to present our case. Our attorneys present our case. And when I say our case, we are a part of that, but we're not the only ones. Right? So our organization is Lioness Justice Impacted Women's Alliance. And that organization is an organizational plaintiff in the lawsuit. And so we are representing women, girls, gender expansive individuals incarcerated or formerly incarcerated in Texas. So that's what our organization is. And that's why we felt it so important to be a part of the lawsuit. Now, there are some other advocacy groups that are a part of the lawsuit as well. And then there's Bernie Teed.
Yeah.
So there's an incarcerated individual who, because of his underlying medical conditions, the heat has exacerbated them, made him very ill, caused him some very serious medical issues. And so he's part of that lawsuit as well. There was a whole team of lawyers. Well, we're going to walk you through it because I'll tell you, I think I was expecting, we have been working with a few lawyers. And even though we know that there was a team of lawyers, walking in to the federal courthouse, and I couldn't video y'all because we're not allowed to record. I wanted to make some TikToks and some Instagram reels, and it wasn't happening. And actually, I thought about it, but you talked me out of it. You got scared for me.
Yeah, it very clearly said that it was in statute that you are not allowed to video or record audio or video in that building or adjacent to it. So we had to go all the way out near the street. to do that.
We did. And I see we are streaming live on our regular show on Instagram as well for you all that are watching on Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube and all of the places that we normally see you. But I have to give a big shout out on Instagram to Jessica Kent. She's my friend and a fellow ex incarcerated person.
Yeah.
And she's doing good works and getting her life together and showing a good example for her family. And Jessica, sending big love. Thanks for watching. And so, yeah, we're talking about this federal court case, right? So we walk into the courtroom, and first of all, it was pretty full.
Yeah.
There wasn't, like, it wasn't easy to find a seat. There were people standing in the back this morning before I testified.
Yeah. Well, I want to add this part, that when we walked in, we just found a seat on the left side of the room. So when you go in, there's the judge sitting up there with the court officials, and then there's this big long table of attorneys, and then there's big long table of attorneys facing each other, which is very different than state court, where it's kind of facing the judge and there's only 2 or 3 people with the attorney. It's teams facing each other essentially around these big long tables. And so we go sit in an empty seat, squeeze in on the left side, and there was a lady. She was real nice to me. I said, "I love your purse." It was a cute little purse. She goes, "Oh, thank you." She goes, I don't mind a care at all, but I think you might. I think the advocates for the plaintiffs, the attorneys, are sitting on that side. And we looked around. We're like, "Oh,
we were sitting with the prison staff."
Yeah. So we got up and
we realized that you could identify at least the men that were the defendants, were the prison staff, because they were wearing, of course they were all in suits, but they all had a little TDCJ state prison pin. And so we realized we were right in the middle, being our normal selves, because y'all, even listen, we know how to be professional when it's time, but mostly we're just like this everywhere we go. And so there's like a lot of banter and
right. Well, and we certainly didn't want to be sitting with that group when we start.
So I had to get up and leave.
Other.
I had to get up and leave for a moment, and I come back and my people are all gone, and I sit over there. And so now I'm by myself sitting with the law. I was sitting with the laws, and the lady said, they went over there. And I thought she meant like they went out to the restroom. And so I go out and I'm looking for them. There's 3 or 4. We ended up with like 8 supporters there this morning, which was pretty phenomenal. Or yesterday morning, excuse me. And I come back and I'm like, I don't know where they are. And I go back to sit, and she goes, "No, they're sitting on y'all's side." Like, yeah. I said, "Oh, okay." So anyway, yeah. So that's how it started. And now I knew that they were going to call me first. Like we knew our lawyers told us, like, "Hey, we feel like your testimony is powerful and it would be effective to get the mood of exactly what it's like inside of a Texas prison in the summer." So they called me.
Yeah. Well, see,
we both felt like throwing up. I'm not going to lie.
We
walked into the courthouse. Both of us were nauseous. I was like, "Girl, I can't believe we're doing this.
I can't believe we're doing this. We are being the voices of thousands of women and trans folks in our system. And thank God. I just want to take a special moment to thank all the people that we knew that showed up.
Yes.
And I think that deserves a real shout out. Peaches came.
Peaches, Chanel Jones.
Sarah Reyes, I see you on this Instagram. Lauren Johnson.
Crystal
Taharina. Jessica. So we felt wrapped up in support and love from members of our organization and allies. So
why was that so important for me personally? Being on the stand, when I got up on the stand, it's very confusing, y'all. It's different than state court. I had never been in a federal court. You like go around this little thing to get up on the stand. You're sitting next to the judge, and the judge is like way up here and you're way down here. It's really odd. So just going up there. But I'll say this, I do a confidence walk whenever I'm feeling not so confident, I have a walk, and it's mirrored after someone I did time with. The way she walked, I was like, that chick, nobody will ever F with her
Right.
because she walks like a baddie. Like she is that bitch. And so that walk is the walk that I take on. It's Do you want to know who gave me that walk?
Who?
Deja Ramos. Michelle Ramos.
Deja, if you're watching, you were in spirit. And too, I want to recognize Brenda. I see you on the live. Brenda was there with a family member showing support as well, and some reporters that are really great reporters on criminal justice issues. And I also want to acknowledge our community here that sent great, beautiful, loving messages. Members of Linus, Lori, Diane, Mandy, like all of y'all were sending positive energy. Folks on the inside were calling and supporting. So I just want to acknowledge your presence was there in that courtroom. So I think that helped a lot. It helped me. But I was more stressed out than
she was more stressed out. I was okay, but we cannot not talk about the defense's opening remarks before I get on stand. So the defense attorney for the state, the Attorney General's office, the Texas Attorney's General's office, goes for her opening remarks and says this is very paraphrased. This is not, there's no recording in there. Very paraphrased, says, basically, sir, we don't have the means to air condition Texas prisons. Like, oh, well, no matter what happens, we don't have the means. And he said, hold up. Wait a minute. So what you're telling me is if I decide today that Texas is violating the 8th Amendment of the Constitution, and I order you to stop violating the 8th Amendment by putting safe temperatures in your prisons, your response to that is, oh, well?
Essentially. Essentially, Marci, you're right. That's how I interpreted that. And, some of the news stories that came out over the past day really kind of point to that. That's how the opening remarks went, right? And this was the theme that we so far on day 2 consistently heard through all their word salad and play and, looking at, well, it's hot and it's dangerous. However, it's not our fault we don't have the money. The legislator haven't given it to us, but at the same time, it's also kind of your fault because you have an underlying condition, and we have plans to air condition everything in a couple of years, someday when we get it. So even if these violations are true, we can't do anything about it, right? Like that is the overall message and impression that we're getting through the hearing. And the judge has been very fair and very, very, very fair to both sides. But let's go back to your testimony while I was nestled in between Peaches and Sarah, who
Yeah, so I get up on the stand and I get sworn in, and our attorneys gave me my questioning, which I knew what they were going to ask me. It's something that's something that attorneys do, is prep their witnesses by letting them know, hey, this is what you're going to be asked. And so I wasn't nervous.
No, once you got up there, you were in your zone. You were in your zone.
Yeah, I felt very confident, and I was just speaking on what I know. I knew I spent 10 summers inside of Texas prisons. I know exactly what it feels like to be cooked alive. I know exactly what it feels like to not be able to sleep, not be able to eat, not be able to concentrate because of the heat, and to watch folks around me getting sick. So I wasn't worried, and so we did our part with our attorney, which lasted about an hour. I think that I felt that the judge was listening. I felt that he was hearing me. I felt like it was well received. And then the cross.
Yeah, which this is where, I got a little kind of, I said, oh boy, here we go.
Right.
Here we go,
Well,
right?
I'm not gonna lie. I was nervous. I was nervous she might bring up whatever, and the case is still ongoing, so I don't want to say what she could bring up and like give her some ideas, But yeah, I didn't go to prison for hugging a bunch of nuns, and I had very severe mental health crises during my incarceration. So my record in prison, it's not like yours, Toonch, where you had everybody else doing your dirty work for you. I was doing my own dirty work, girl. Yeah. And so we were concerned, and she said, and frankly, my TikTok videos.
Yeah.
She said, let's turn to exhibit such and such, and they turned to the big screen, and I thought,
Here we go. This is it.
It's going to be a, hey y'all.
Right.
And I
grabbed Sarah's leg, and then I grabbed Peach's leg, and I said, dear God, please don't. And then it was just like organizational documents, and there was just a very short back and forth about like our status, with our fiscal sponsors. They've tried to say that the organizations don't have standing in the case because of legalities about membership requirements or whatever. But the judge has already made that clear when he refused to dismiss it. And that was it.
Yeah.
That was it.
Very simple testimony. So, and we won't just like walk through every single, but we'll give you the highlights of the past 2 days, right? So, they then called, they called an expert witness who was she was the researcher. I don't remember what order.
It's all blurred together. Yesterday was a lot of the, some medical doctors, researchers, right? Like, so they went through all the research and reports. There was some other advocates that testified, and, which was really setting the tone. But I think what we heard today, Marci, really, really seals the deal.
With the autopsies?
Yeah. So this today we were getting in the nitty gritty of it. They've laid a foundation, and so let's talk to the first person up today was a medical toxologist, and that's when we heard about those autopsies.
The autopsies were hard. As people that have been in those prison cells, and probably, dare I say, for anybody reading an autopsy about people that got cooked to death, right? Like people that died because they were housed in extreme temperatures. That's a horrible thing to read and hear about and mull over. It's not just that they said, and not to diminish the names that were mentioned today. When I say, like, it's not like they said John Doe died and that was it. No, it was this person, and this was his internal body temperature, his core body temperature, which some of those core body temperatures, Toonch.
This is the moment, and not only did we hear this through one witness, there was a forensic pathologist that also we went through every single one of those autopsies again. We had a mental health expert talk about the toll it takes on people's mental health. And then we'll dig a bit more into that other very impactful. But let's really focus on those autopsies. It's one thing to hear that, there was a great report. Lauren, I always mess up her last name. Lauren, forgive me if you're watching this. But so she recently did a piece about those autopsies. And so to read this, because we haven't had those before, we've just had death certificates. And so to read and then hear today in real time that somebody's temperature was 109, their core temperature was 109 when they died.
Armando Gonzalez, a trans woman housed in a Texas men's prison, died. Heat, a major contributing factor. And her core temperature was 109 degrees. And then to hear the state responding to that in such a callous way, trying to undermine the meaning of someone's core temperature being so incredibly high. It was hard. It was hard. It was hard for everybody in the room, but I think just particularly hard for us, having survived those temperatures and knowing exactly what it feels like, not knowing what it's doing to your body, or worrying that you're getting enough to drink, or worrying that the elderly person next to you hasn't gotten up for chow in 3 days and you're trying to get her to eat a noodle, but she doesn't have an appetite. These are the things that we watched and lived. And so then to hear them kind of talked in such a medical way, when I feel like some of the doctors, and not that they were callous, just that they are seeing the papers, and it's this case, and that's what that was to them. And to us, we see the people, and we see what they were feeling. And I think the family members would feel the same way, that they're seeing their loved ones, and that's how it was rough.
Yeah. And, the toxologist, she was incredible. She was absolutely incredible. And when the state tried to, essentially infer that,
discredit. They tried to
discredit, infer, and say, well, the percentage of deaths go up in non-air conditioned prisons. Just this percentage doesn't seem like a lot. It's, and the doctor said, well, what it translates into is hundreds of unnecessary deaths. So that's a lot for me, and that's a lot for their families. So I think it matters a lot.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that the professional witnesses, the experts, which I would say I was an expert on women's prisons, but everybody handled the cross-examination very well. Nobody got rattled. Everybody just told their truth and what they know to be true. And so I think that when you're on the stand, when you're on the side of truth, it was very simple. Some of the experts were testifying up there for more than 2 hours. With cross-examination going back and forth, and yeah, so I'm just really proud. I know you want to get to the big one, and there is a big witness that we want to talk about, but I also want to bring attention to the psychologist who testified about, and I'm bringing this up because what we know, what we saw in prison is mental health. The heat does exacerbate mental health issues, including all the way up to what we see, higher suicide attempts, real ones, during summer months. Yeah. And so now they have this mental health professional talking about what the heat does to someone's mental health.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really smart of the attorneys to bring attention to that.
Right.
And it also goes hand in hand with a research project that we in our capacity as Lioness Justice Impacted Women's Alliance just recently published.
Yeah.
It just got published yesterday.
And we can put the link in all of our platforms, but it essentially is a study that shows the effect that disasters and emergencies have on incarcerated women's mental health. And so it was really interesting to hear that. Again, hear all these medical professionals validate what we all know to be true, right? Like we spoke to a reporter today, and I said, the state has gaslit us, meaning they have worked really hard to make us question our reality based on our experience, right? And so just to be able to hear this testimony, even though a lot of it was heavy and hard to hear, to have those experts just really validate what we know.
It did, right. It did. Anytime we have a professional that is doing research in this work and publishing articles and research projects, it is a validation.
Now, I do want to, on that note, there was some testimony yesterday from the TDCJ He was
Mr. Sweeten.
the assistant.
He's the deputy director.
Deputy director.
Mr. Sweeten.
So-
It was a deposition.
Yeah.
So it was a recorded deposition.
Yeah. And so
it was damaging.
It was pretty bad. It was pretty bad.
It felt damaging.
Yeah, it really did, because he was saying some things like, I can't believe he just said that out loud. And one of the things they showed him, several things, but in terms of the research that we had been talking about all day, you know, the experts have been talking about, they also brought up the research from Dr. Purdom and Dr. Dixon out of Texas A&M with the Hazard Center, their Hazard Center there, right? And so they go through the report, the research, and they were like, well, you know, essentially paraphrasing, well, what do you think of this? And he's like, I don't think anything of it. I don't find it credible. And they were like, well, so you don't think Texas A&M is a credible institute? He says, well, I think the college is, you know, credible. And I'm not calling into question the integrity of the researchers, you know, Dr. Purdom, but I don't know where they got this information, this data. I don't know where they came up with, because we weren't involved in it. And I looked at Marci. I said, so let me get this straight. Because you weren't involved in it and you can't control the outcome, it's not valid.
Right.
And I'm like, how, I don't even know what the word for is. How pompous, how fucking pompous of you to say, I get so frustrated, y'all, because we have listened to the state, to TDCJ, talk out of both sides of their mouth for 2 days straight. Oh, they're reputable. Oh, they are. But this stuff isn't, because I didn't control that data.
Dr. Dixon, who happens to be a Texas A&M superstar, frankly, who authored that report that they tried to rip apart, that Mr. Sweeten attempted to rip apart. She happens to be here, and she's hearing it for the first time.
It was, Benika, it was, and I'm sorry, I forgot to mention too, that Dr. Dixon was there in support of,
Yes.
you know, not just me and Marci, but all incarcerated Texans.
And she strategically placed so that while I was on the stand, and where you sit, you're looking at the defendants. I'm looking at their attorneys. I'm looking at all the suits with the TDCJ pins, and I see Benika right in the middle of all of them. And she's there, and she's giving me a smile, and I'm making eye contact with her, and she's grounding me. So I do appreciate that. But yes.
Yeah. Well, and I think for us to hear that about researchers that we know personally, of such high integrity, of such brilliance, and who have been so kind and thoughtful, to hear that added another layer of injury to the insult. How pompous, how dare you?
Yes. Yes.
I'm not calling into question the integrity of the researchers, but I don't know where they got their information. So they were like, did you even take the report and the things that were in it and investigate it to even see? He said, no, because I didn't believe it to be credible at all. And it was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like if some researchers at Texas A&M or Harvard or a well-respected university with respected researchers and folks with PhDs wrote an analysis of, I don't know, our podcast or Lioness or our other organizations we work at, or our study that we did, and I read it and I saw things I didn't like or that troubled me, I would investigate. I would at least do that much to say, okay, I don't know where this is coming from or where they got this. Let me reach out to them. Let me look through this information and see, let us look into it.
Right.
They didn't even bother to. That is how little and how much disregard that they had for all the research and all the expertise nationwide about this topic, Marci.
Yeah, most definitely. And the temperatures, again, for those of you just hopping on, or maybe you missed the first half, we're talking about the lawsuit against the Texas Department of Criminal Justice that involves the extreme temperatures inside of Texas prisons. Basically, what we know is they are housing people in temperatures that cause illnesses leading up to even death. And we know that from our lived experience. We know that from studies. So that's what's happening, right? And so what we also know is that the Texas Department of Criminal Justice themselves have recorded temperatures inside of the prisons, inside of the housing areas where people are living, as an average 110, all the way up to, in one case, 149 degrees. The temperature in 2020 in a cell that I lived in a dorm that I lived in, was 136 degrees. That's what kind of temperatures we're talking about. And I know I see y'all asking some questions, and I appreciate those questions. We have a lot of information we want to get to you tonight. So if we can get to those questions at the end, we will. And if not, we will do it at the beginning of next week.
Sure.
Could we
Sure.
do that? Because some of
Yeah.
you are asking about dental care and other things that are unrelated to the lawsuit. And we could do that at the beginning of next episode. Okay. Because those are important issues also. So I appreciate those questions. And thank y'all again for liking the live. Thank you for commenting. Thank you for sharing the live and all of the good things. We appreciate y'all so much. We were really disappointed we couldn't get to the rec yard
Right.
at our
Like
normal time.
it was
But we
turnout
were
was
sitting
late.
in the courtroom, and we wanted to give you all the information that we could. Goodness gracious. Yeah.
Let's talk about what all the information over the past 2 days has been pretty incredible. But when they called up,
Are you talking about Dean?
when they called up the witness, yes,
Dean.
Yeah.
I think his name is Dean Williams.
and this guy in a suit, they call him up.
He had been there the whole.
Yeah.
We didn't know who he was because he was in a suit, and the men that were in suits, unless they were sitting at the attorney's table, they were with TDCJ, but he was sitting on our side. He
Yeah.
had been there the whole time. We didn't know who he was. So they call him, and he goes to the stand. And one of the very first opening questions was, have we ever met? Our attorney asked him, have we ever met before today? And he said,
Well, yes, you sued me.
yeah. He got sued as a director of a prison system.
Right.
That was his expertise, is that he has managed prison systems in Alaska and in Colorado.
And he very clearly said, I have been sitting in the same seat that Brian Collier sits in as an executive director over prison systems in Alaska and Colorado. And then the other shocking part of that was, he said, and I know Mr. Collier well. I consider him a friend. I always have. I don't know after this, but.
And I'll tell you, the first part of this gentleman's testimony, I kept my eyes on, just like in prison, just like when I was locked up,
Right.
I kept my eyes on the laws at all times, and I watched Brian Collier a lot during this. And I have such a bad taste in my mouth for the system as a whole, that I want to see this man who's in charge of the safety and well-being of every incarcerated person in the Texas prison system. I want to see him as a person, and it's hard because what I see when I look at him is damage and harm and indifference. But maybe he's a guy that's bit off more than he can chew. The Texas
Right.
prison system is huge. I don't know. But this man said they were friends. And when he said that, Brian Collier looked down and he stayed in his lap for the first 20 minutes of this man's testimony.
Well, yeah, looking through his phone and
Yeah.
staring at his lap. And, we are super observant, right? Like thank you, BPD, right? Like, thank you, trauma. We are always watching people's tone and facial expressions and just trying to get a read on things. And that did seem like that was happening. And,
Right.
and Dean talked about he believed Brian to be a good man, and he explained how difficult it is to be the leader, the one responsible. He said, at the end of the day, it is the director, it's the executive director who is responsible. It doesn't matter about money. It don't matter about the challenges. That is the heavy burden of being the person in charge of the custody and care of so many incarcerated people and staff, right?
And as someone who calls Brian Collier, the executive director, the defendant in the lawsuit of the Texas prison system, to call him his friend and then get on the stand and say, and when our attorney said, "Why are you here today?" And he said, basically, he gave 3 solid reasons, right? And this is all from memory because I wasn't writing anything down and we can't record. But he gave 3 solid reasons, and one was his faith, his religion, and but one was that he just literally couldn't, in good conscience, know. That the third reason was, he said, "I'm here because we are talking about life and death."
Yeah, he gave several things that advocates, are always working on, and mailroom policies and things like that. He said, but this is life or death. And he said, I'm here, and this is I believe, a direct quote. He said, because it shocked my conscience.
Yes.
And, he goes on to explain what he's done in the past as an executive director, how he would handle these crises, how he would, look at core temperatures and respond. And he said, all the things that an executive director has to deal with, it's a heavy burden. And I believe the attorney asked, well, why wouldn't core temperatures be recorded, right? Because Elizabeth Haggerty
and John Suthers,
their core
John
temperatures.
Anthony Suthers, who passed away last year, a young man who the autopsy report read he was hot to the touch
and sweating.
The TDCJ medical folks did not record his core temperature. And yeah, why? And all of the medical people, experts that answered today said there is that standard practice across the board. Right. That's a vital sign. You take vital signs. Right. And why wasn't it recorded? Or Elizabeth Haggerty, who passed away last year on the Dr. Lane Murray unit.
In the middle of a heat crisis, y'all aren't recording core temperatures. And our attorney asked, the plaintiff's attorney asked, why wouldn't they do this? That we've heard from the medical professionals say this is absolute, like way below medical standard. This is an no. Oh my goodness, right? And he said, I can tell you the reason I suspect, and it's not good.
It's not a nice one.
It's not a nice one. He said, systems have a way of protecting themselves, and there is political risk at the cost of the executive director's job. When your boss is the governor, your boss is the state of Texas. And when you do something or say something that essentially is not what they want you to do, you risk your job. He said, but I believe firmly that you have to scream this from the rooftop. You have to be totally transparent and say, legislature, governor, anyone that will listen, the public, people are dying. We desperately need the funds to fix this and fix it now. And he said all those mitigating things like cool showers, there was a lot of discussions about, does ice work? Does fan work? All the medical professionals say, no, right? Like we thought maybe 20 years ago it did, but it doesn't. The research shows that. But I think he articulated it best, Marci, because he said, all the ways to mitigate harm are when you don't know that there's a cure, that you don't have a cure. He said, we did that with COVID. We didn't have a cure for COVID. We didn't have a vaccine. So we're mitigating harm. We're doing harm reduction, because that's all we have. Right. But the fix is air conditioning,
climate control,
period. He said, so all this stuff, is not good enough because it shocks the conscience. That you've got folks that have core temperatures of 109 degrees when they die. It is immediate. It is now. It is sound alarm. It has put your job on the line for what is right. And I don't believe we've seen that from Brian Collier. He's a nice guy, maybe. I don't know. Trying the best he can.
We had a conversation with Dean after his testimony in the hallway outside the courtroom, and he said, Brian's a nice guy. What he said is, I believe in Texas, the culture has gotten so bad that everybody's just used to it. Everybody is used to people dying. It's not shocking to them. And so everybody's just used to it. They're numb to it. It's not a shock. It's not important to them. I want to say this too, and this is not about Dean's testimony. This is backtracking, just kind of responding to this comment a little bit about staff. So no staff members testified for the plaintiffs. There weren't any. You would not have a job, dare I say, if you,
right.
And you would lose it for some other reason. We all know how that works, right? You would be testifying against your boss. But some of the evidence presented today was how in the past 2 years, 89 workers' comp claims have been filed for heat-related illnesses.
Yeah.
89. So,
Well, Marci, I mean, just even that alone, right? Like there's no prison staff willing to testify, right? Well, because they know that Brian will fire them. Brian won't go up there to the governor or to legislators and speak the truth, the whole truth, right? Because he doesn't want to get fired. And we've said that all along.
Yeah.
I don't give a fuck about the money. It is your job and responsibility to speak the truth and do what's right and scream it and go, just as and that's what Dean talked about. He said, I would do everything in my power to articulate how dire this is. And Brian is not. They have all talked out both sides of their mouth and, it's not that bad. And we don't believe, the cold showers work. And Marci was the first person to say it. These mitigation harm reduction things, okay, if they
what provided, are those it includes cold showers, respite areas in the prison so that people incarcerated can go to air-conditioned areas. The policy says whenever they want. We know that definitely doesn't happen. And ice and water made available 24/7. And first of all, ice machines in a prison won't even allow that, like that,
right.
Right. And then the staffing, showers. We know that if you live in a cell, you have to have a staff member to come get in the shower. Showers are only open certain times of the day. They're closed. It's just, it's ridiculous. So I was the first one to speak on that, but I certainly wasn't the last.
Oh, no,
that was a common theme.
Right. And Marci said, it's the access. It's the access. It's the access. And so all the medical professionals said, in the past, we thought these things were more helpful than what they really are now, right? Because temperatures have changed, and now we have the research to show fans do not help, period. You have to change the
experts said it today. Folks that I was locked up with when we knew, sorry, I'm getting excited because when I remember sitting in the day room saying, this fan isn't doing shit. We are dying. Like this fan is blowing hot air at us. And what the professionals said today, lots of research has been done around that. You cannot rely on fans.
They will not cool the temperature. I want to speak to this.
That's why I highlighted it.
Oh, okay,
Johnny Gonzalez says, because I highlight it because I did touch on this, Johnny. Yeah. And so I do want to bring it up. And for those of you that are on IG, the comment was made from, it looks like Facebook. Johnny's watching the podcast from Facebook tonight. And he says, don't forget the builders. As a professional architect, the builders should have known the buildings were not suitable for human detention. And this is what we talked about. Even the newer prisons, even prisons that were built in a time in Texas when air conditioning was standard practice for all new buildings, because we understand prisons built in the 1800s, nothing had air conditioning. Like right. we're not being that, right? But these newer prisons, That was brought up.
Yes, it was. And the plaintiff's attorneys had talked about, do you believe that non-air conditioning is a part of the punishment? The things that happen and the suffering. Oh, no, it's not. Well, when the majority of the newer prisons were built, it was built during a time of, I don't want to say hard on crime, but and I remember this because I was a young person.
Court.
I remember when in TYC, when they came in, my first year there, and that's the Texas Youth Commission, we had our clothes, we had like a radio, like we had some normalcy, right? Like, and we were, it was still a terrible place, but we had this little bit of normalcy. They came in, took all of our stuff, put us in uniforms, made us face the wall. Like there was this hardening. Take all the things. They took gym equipment out. They painted all the walls gray and white, painted over mural. And so there was this idea that, well, this was a prison boom too. So they were building all these prisons in the early 90s, really for economical growth in rural communities, which totally backfired. But they purposely built these facilities with air conditioning in the admin, the warden's office, but not in the housing areas, not where people are living. That was a conscious decision based on the belief that we didn't deserve
and that was talked about today.
Absolutely.
In the courthouse. And I see Cynthia Morton's watching on Instagram, and I appreciate your support literally since day one when I've started sharing my story, and we appreciate your support on the podcast. And she's asking, so TYC, was it air conditioned, and is it now?
So the youth facilities do have climate control. And also it was mentioned today that Texas jails, which we all know, including animal shelters, have by law, it has to be maintained between 65 and 85 degrees. So these other facilities that are carceral, even for pets, has temperature control.
Right.
But not the adult prison system.
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah. Goodness.
It was a lot.
It was a lot. We've been crying on and off all day. Some things at one point, and I'll just get, because it is our podcast and we are giving an update, but I also just want to say that, Chanel Jones, who I was incarcerated with on the Dr. Lane Murray unit, I did my entire time with her. There have been a couple of moments for her and I this year that have been completely surreal. The first moment was in Colorado. Mm-hmm. And that was when she has a 2-year-old, and I have these wild teenage daughters, and my youngest daughter babysat her 2-year-old, and Chanel remembered seeing pictures of her at 2 years old. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of, so today I looked over and Chanel was sitting on the other side of you, or yesterday. Yes. When I testified, it's all one blur, right. To tell you the truth. She was sitting on the other side of you. And I looked over and I thought, I'm fixing to go testify in this federal courtroom about things that her and I experienced together in the same room, in the same building. And she's here to support me. Like she made her way to get there. And it was not easy for a mom of a 2-year-old who works a full-time job, but just thinking how our friends on the inside, I hope that they know, like we're doing this because we love them. We care about them. We believe that they are people and not, whatever the state wants to inmate. We heard that word so much today. It was a lot, but it's important. It's important. And I feel very blessed to have the community here on our show. My family on Instagram, I see y'all with me today, and our community out here.
Yeah, I think it's it is a certain type of feeling. It's an overwhelmed feeling in a very strange to articulate way. Like it's a good feeling, but it's also this really intense, deep, sorrowful, but glad, but joyful, but painful feeling. Like when we talk about the stuff that's going on inside of our prisons, and then you're like doing this stuff with our group with people that you did time with, right? Like having lunch with Crystal.
Tony is watching on Instagram.
Hey, girl.
This is her, dark and lovely.
Oh, hey,
she
girl.
loves you. We love you too.
Having lunch with Crystal afterwards on our break, and just like remembering those moments that we had together in there, horrible moments, painful moments, suffering, and then to be out here, I don't know how to describe it. It's a feeling of we went through that together, and there, Chanel was sitting next to me, and she was Marci got a uniform.
I do. Oh, I could show it.
And we thought maybe we might need it to just show what the material's like.
Eric Castillo, who is also an advocate for Texas prison reform, he gave this to us to use. This is a TDCJ.
It's a real one.
It's a real one. And it was interesting getting to show people how heavy the material is and how it's not breathable. Our lawyers said, we just want to see it. We don't know if we can use it. And then they were so busy.
Yeah.
Then they were so busy they barely paid it any mind because they're it's a nice thick.
I always was like it's a burlap sack.
Yeah.
And Chanel had that in her lap. And the more you were talking, I could, even though she was calming me, she's so good at that. And Sarah was here, but I could feel Chanel's energy, right? Like I could feel this common energy between us as you were talking. The more you got into the details. And so she's folding this and she's smoothing it out and she's folding it and she's folding it exactly how we folded our uniforms. And I wanted to cry. How fucking dare they do this to us?
Yeah. Do you have survivor's guilt?
I do. I mean, I think that's, part of our passion, right? Because there's a Chanel and a Mandy and a Lori and a Marci and a Demetris right now struggling inside of those prisons, folding their uniform at the end of their bed.
Yeah.
And that's why we do what we do. And till my last breath, I don't know, it really hits a certain way, especially, it's one thing when we're all together and we're enjoying stuff, we're like, man, look how far we've come. But it's weird when we have these moments like at, in some capacity like this, at a courthouse or the Capitol, and you hear and you feel it again, and you're with each other, and it's almost like we're transported together in our, I don't know, our energy or our mind. Yeah.
So after today, we had to leave before the last witness because we needed to get home to y'all. We need to get to our community here. And, we promised an update episode tonight and we were going to deliver. And so we didn't get to see the last, but our plaintiffs, our attorneys, the attorneys for the plaintiffs were supposed to rest. Mm-hmm. And then the state has 2 days to present their case, and we'll know more Friday. So next week, tune in, and we might not make it a whole episode, right? But we're definitely going to recap what we know. We don't really expect the judge just to say, once the defense rests and they do closing remarks, I don't really expect the judge to say, well, this is it, this is what we're doing. And then I need to clarify that this is not the hearing, because there's going to be all kinds of other stuff happening. This is going to be a years-long process, but because we know that people are literally dying right now, this is a preliminary injunction.
Right.
Our attorneys filed to have a preliminary injunction to get immediate relief, to prevent deaths right now. And of course, the defense tried to stop it. No, this is not valid. No, we don't even need this hearing. No. And the judge said, oh, I think it is valid. They're saying they have experts saying people are dying. I think human life is pretty valid reason to have a hearing. So, yeah.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Lisa. Thank you. That means so much. You might read it for the folks on Instagram.
So Lisa, who is a huge ally, has a daughter incarcerated in Texas prisons, also a part of Linus, says, today I read the Austin statement to several different women from Plain State Unit, Murray Unit, Hobby Unit, and Crane. They were yelling and praying in the background. You women are making history. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for reading that to the ladies. And we love that we love when they see on the news or read in a newspaper that we're out here fighting for them, because I remember feeling so alone. And we're going to have to wrap this up because I'm not going to cry like this all night. How can you help? How can people help? How can people get involved? How can they support not only the lawsuit, but and Senorita said her story. Yeah, how can people support Toonchi?
Well, sure. I mean, some simple things, and I want you to know whatever action you take is meaningful. Whether it's sharing news stories, just something like Lisa did. I mean, that's pretty impactful, empowering, right? Like sharing social media shares, but like you want to take a step further, write your legislators. They hold the purse strings. And so make your voice heard with them. Make your voice heard at TDCJ. Email them. Attend rallies, protest, donate to organizations like Linus or the other organizational partners that we have. Join them. Join us, right? Like whatever level of participation you would like to have, I think is definitely impactful, right? So I don't want you to ever feel like, if you're just checking the podcast or sharing a news story, that you don't feel like you're making an impact. You are making an incredible impact. So right. It takes all of us in all the ways that we can participate for change.
And if you're watching from Facebook, Brenda May copied and pasted an article from anyways, so you guys can look at that. But yeah. For more updates, watch your news. I think it's all over the news. I think you can Google that and see some articles and learn a little bit more. And we will be back. Now, we'll be back on time next week, pending any weird stuff that goes on.
Pending that Toonchi will show up on time.
Oh, no kidding.
That I'm not late. Or
well, whether you're late or not, I'm going to be here. And that's who y'all really come for. Let's get real.
I mean, I'm pretty sure that it's the Toonchi.
We love you all. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for liking, sharing the live, all of those important things. Thank you for supporting us and being our community, being our family. This is quite literally our favorite night of the week. And I love you all so much. I'm not even going to say final thoughts because we don't have time for you, Toonchi. We're done.
With us on the Recyard Women's Prison Podcast with Marci, Marie, and Toonchi.